This episode is brought to you by Bleacher Report. How do you follow sports? From college football to the NBA, Bleacher Report brings you the latest news, live scores, and epic highlights from your favorite leagues, teams, and athletes, all in one app. Dive into exclusive shows hosted by your favorite athletes and original Bleacher Report series with breaking news, rumors, and predictions all season long. Download Bleacher Report to personalize your coverage.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Hey, it's Austin James. If you're like me, trying to live your best life while living with diabetes, you can relate to worrying if you're doing a good job managing your diabetes. I use the Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor to get real-time glucose readings and see the impact of every meal and activity to make better decisions. The Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor can help me live life with diabetes on my own terms, and it gives me more time for the things I love, like being a dad and a musician. Now this is progress. Learn more at freestylelibre.us.
For prescription only. Safety info found at freestylelibre.us.
Hello there and welcome to a festive Friday 5 brought to you by 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. And I am your host, Rich Ferraro. In a few minutes, we're going to discuss some of the top stories coming out of the City Ground, and we're going to be doing that with Steven Toplis. And Steven and I will also preview this weekend's match away at Brentford. But first of all, let's go straight over to the 1865 news desk and join Jamie.
Hi, this is Jamie Martin with the top 5 Forest stories from the 1865 news desk of this week. Now, the headline to this week's news: Evangelos Marinakis has won a prestigious footballing award. At a high-profile event this week, Nottingham Forest, Olympiacos and Rio Ave owner Evangelos Marinakis was awarded for his contribution to football. Created by Tutor Sport, an Italian outlet, the Golden Boy Award has had many categories and is widely known as one of the most renowned awards around, with journalists voting for award winners. This year, Evangelos Marinakis won the Career Award, citing success with Olympiacos' European Trophy victory and now success with Nottingham Forest. The second piece of news, though, does involve the owner once more. He's in talk to buy new clubs and also adding new staff. Now, talk of new clubs joining the football group owned by Evangelos Marinakis has come thick and fast, with reports picking up pace and new staff additions supposedly imminent. Now, according to Sport24, a Greek publication, Marinakis is set to add ex-Olympiacos staff member Lina Suluku as CEO of the group with, to quote, a special focus on Nottingham Forest. Now, ex-Forest and Olympiacos staff Francois Modesta is set to join back with Marinakis too. More reports set to come on Edu, who looks likely to join the group also in the coming time. Alongside this, Marinakis is in negotiations to buy Rio de Janeiro's Vasco da Gama, but there is still work to be done on that. Sao Paulo's Cotia youth system is also an interest of Marinakis, who wishes to invest in the system and return for player and staff exchanges. However, the club are said to be against the idea of selling off its world-famous system. But with that being said, it has recently been not up to the standard that it has before, and potential financial investment is needed. Could this be leverage for Marinakis to invest in Sao Paulo? We'll have to wait and see. More updates to come in due course. Now, the third piece of news this week, Nottingham Forest stay in the top 4, 16 games in. Who would have thought that a year ago? Probably no one. The superb form of Chris Wood up front and the team in general has powered Forest to come back from a 3-0 away loss to Man City and beat United at their stomping ground and Villa at the City Ground. Unreal results. 22 games left to go, 66 points up for grabs. What could the end of the season hold for Forest? Now, the fourth piece of news this week. Thursday marks a year since Cooper's sacking. Now, Cooper took charge of Forest in September 2021 and was sacked in December of 2023 after a poor run of form. And Forest once again with their backs against the wall fighting relegation. But despite this, Cooper started the belief. He made it happen. Forest achieved the Premier League dream once again. Regardless of how it ended, he's a club legend and one fans will never forget. Some of the most incredible moments for any Forest fan, especially ones of the younger generation such as myself, who'd never seen such success. And this week marked a year since his sacking. We are wishing Steve all the best. Now, the final piece of news, and this is really exciting news as well, Stadium Tour has revealed huge news about ground development. Now, Stadium Tour this week at the City Ground revealed some new exciting news about the ground and its development. Per the reports, the contractor is considering an Anfield approach to development, with 3,000 seats to be retained in the Peter Taylor stand while development takes place. Demolition of the remaining parts of the Peter Taylor stand behind those seats will happen potentially as soon as 2025. It's unclear what part of 2025 that'll be, though. Now, another aim is to have the Bridgeford stand as tall as the Brian Clough stand, with a vision to have the stadium up to 42,000 people in capacity by 2028. The report also confirms that all houses bar 2 on Colic Road have been bought, a huge plus for Forest. Very ambitious times for Forest, doing well on the pitch and off the pitch. That is all from me, though, this week. The latest from the 1865 news desk. I'm Jamie Martin. Be sure to catch up with me on X via @I'm Jamie Martin. Updates on Nottingham Forest related news throughout the week. Take care and have a good Christmas.
Thank you very much, Jamie, and wishing you a very Merry Christmas. Now, Stephen, how are you doing? Have you recovered from last Saturday's match yet?
Just about, yeah. That was some ending, wasn't it?
Yeah, quite the roller coaster. And I was when I was reflecting upon it, I was thinking it was a match which really had everything. Because although the first sort of hour or so probably wasn't particularly exciting for most neutrals, actually it's a real game of tactical cat and mouse. And then, of course, things came into life in rather more traditional ways. The save, Villa taking the lead, the VAR decisions. And then, of course, the equaliser and winning goals for Forest. So it really was a match that had a lot going on, including also quite possibly the biggest back three I've ever seen Forest play, with Willy Bolly, Milenkovic and Morato making up the Forest defence at the end. So I'm assuming that in the end you felt you enjoyed it.
Definitely. It's always nice when you win, and in a game like that where it was up against a team that has been so good for the last season or two in Aston Villa, to beat them and stay fifth in the table, stay ahead of the likes of Man City and Spurs, is massive. And I think it gives us great confidence going into the next run of games and beyond.
And I know it's an obvious question. It's something we're going to cover again in next week's Football Terrorist show. But did you ever think at the start of this season that Forest would be going into the Christmas period in the European places?
Not a chance. I would have been very happy with mid-table, 12th, 13th. I would never have thought that we'd be where we are right now. It's incredible. You've got to enjoy it. It's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, enjoy it. We've always said, haven't we, ever since promotion, it's going to be a roller coaster. Let's just make the most of it, because we don't know how long it's going to last. So I think we're continuing to do that. Let's go to the stories that Jamie brought us. So the first one is Nottingham Forest owner Evangelos Marinakis has received the European Golden Boy Career Award for 2024. It's a ceremony in Italy, and the reasoning is that he's had a career dedicated to football, a winning career dedicated to football, and has helped young talent to flourish. Now, the presentation actually probably made more about his success as the owner of Olympiacos, and didn't make a huge amount of mention of his other club interests, including at the City Ground. But on the other hand, an award's an award, and we've seen the evidence of the fact that Marinakis wants to try and run clubs the right way. And, of course, the fact that our very own skipper, Ryan Yates, is a product of the academy, and the club are throwing resources now into the academy and the B team, hopefully suggests that there's something in that.
Yeah, I hope there is, because much has been made recently of this long run of Forest Academy graduates featuring in matchday squads right the way back. You're talking 80 years, aren't you? So at the moment, Ryan Yates is our only hope, really, of keeping that run going, unless we chuck Zach Abbott on the bench. And if Ryan Yates gets a suspension, then unfortunately that run will probably end. It is the one area of the club where you could say that Marinakis hasn't really focused on yet since coming to Forest, and that is really investing in the academy to a point where you can get Premier League players coming through. there's been investment there and plans, but they were at championship level. I think this is hopefully the first step towards us having a real Premier League academy that produces Premier League players, because with the financial rules as they are, pure profit and all that, it's a money spinner now, bringing through your own players. It's important for the first team, of course, bringing in players with that connection and that close proximity to the club, but also financially it makes a lot of sense as well. And they're just on the award. I mean, when I first saw it, I thought somebody had made it up, to be honest. I was like, what Golden Boy? What on earth is this? I thought Marinakis might have even made it up to present to himself, but digging into it a bit deeper, what is being celebrated is good. His success at Olympiacos, which is there to be seen on record, and hopefully some of that is going to rub off on Forest now.
Yeah, and I think it is probably he might not have got it if it weren't for the fact that Olympiacos won the Conference League last season. For the record, it was Lamine Yamal who won the actual Golden Boy award, and I think we could all say that he is, in fact, both golden and a boy. So there you go. Still on the subject of Evangelos Marinakis, obviously there's been some talk about his willingness to invest, and the most prominent one that we've heard about is Vasco da Gama. Is it a good sign for Forest if the owner is looking to kind of have this multi-club model? Is that something that will benefit us here on Trentside?
I think it will, because we've seen it in other clubs around Europe that having a successful link-up with different clubs can bring players into your club. It can take players out of your club in a way that works for all parties, and it allows you to tap into different markets. And we've seen already that Forest have successfully dipped into the Brazilian transfer market, for example, and we've picked out gems like Murillo and Danilo, and hopefully more to come. And I think it's a sensible move to give ourselves presence in other territories, or rather Marinakis' presence in other territories, and all of the clubs can feed into one another that way. And bringing Edu on board as well with his experience, I wouldn't have thought he'd have left Arsenal on a whim. So for him to come in and spearhead this new group of Marinakis clubs, I think is a real coup, and will hopefully bring success to the role.
And do you reckon it's chicken or egg? Do you reckon it's the case of Edu being attracted to work for Marinakis, or do you reckon it's that Marinakis may have identified that Brazil is a territory that he wanted to go into, and therefore Edu would be a good guy to do that, as well as having really good European links?
I think both of them come into play there. I think that having the Brazilian link is important. Somebody like Edu, who's a well-known figure in Brazilian football and European football in particular, and I think we as a club have identified that Brazilian market as a good one to tap into, where you can pick up some really good players for not much money, develop them and give them a gateway into Europe. And if they stay with your club and make you a better team, which I think the likes of Murillo have, alongside Danilo, then that's great. But also, again, it does come back to the financial side. If you bring these young players through and they prove themselves in a top European league, you're going to have clubs higher up the food chain interested in them, and that can bring money into the club. So I see it working both on the pitch and off it, really. It could be a really successful venture.
Yeah. Let's move on from there, because let's focus upon Forest. And as we mentioned earlier, they are in the European places. So as we go into this weekend's match, Forest are currently 4th in the Premier League table on 28 points. Before the Villa match, they were level on points with our Brummie opponents, but obviously we've got a bit of clear air there. And then, so the first thing, Stephen, is did it feel a bit odd as well, knowing that Manchester United's victory against Manchester City was something that many Forest fans were cheering, because it meant that actually we had 4th position all to ourselves?
We've gone from looking out for Luton Town's results last season to now looking for Manchester City's results to make sure that we stay in the top 4. It's unbelievable. It really is. What a position that we find ourselves in. And I'm enjoying it. It's fantastic for the club. It's great to see Forest fans enjoying it. I think days like this and times like this have been a long journey in the making when you think of where we were not all that long ago. I mean, it's coming up for 20 years since relegation into League One, and look where we are now. It's fantastic to see. And you've got to say it, we're in contention for a European place.
For the first time in over 20 years, would you say that we're on the verge of experiencing more ups than downs?
It feels that way. It really does. And I think because of Forest's last 20, 25 years, we've, as fans, naturally taken a slightly pessimistic view on the team. We don't want to get carried away. I think that's always been the Forest way to a degree, because the club always thrives when it's not really fancied or people don't think that we're going to do a lot. And that's where we seem to find our greatest moments and our most memorable days. And this is right up there. Nobody would have predicted at this stage of the season, 16 games in, we'd be in the top 4. It's incredible. And I just hope that the club can build on it. Whether that means in January we have to bring in a couple of new faces to maintain this, who knows? But the way we're playing and the results we're picking up, you've got to fancy us against anybody.
Yeah, and, well, maybe not Man City, and actually Maradona in the Midlands did say to me, like, the more I think about it, the more I think that Man City match was a missed opportunity. We should have beat them.
It's strange now that we look at it like that. I mean, I thought it was a fact that, yeah, we should have done better in the game. Had Chris Wood's effort gone in, that he just put wide of the post, maybe the game would have been different. I did think it was sod's law as well that Man City seemed to turn up in that game when in matches before that they looked a bit shambolic. So swings and roundabouts. Yeah,
and the other thing about the table is that last season the 3 promoted clubs went down, and yet the 3 promoted teams from 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, are Forest, Bournemouth and Fulham, who are in the top 8. What does that say about the standard and the competitiveness of those clubs, the level of investment, and also the state of the Premier League?
It just shows you that it takes time to establish, and we should know that better than anybody after the last 2 seasons and the struggle we had in staying in the league. First of all, the season when we came up, and then again last season. Granted, there were other off-field matters that dictated why it went down to the wire last season, but it takes time to establish yourself, and I think we needed a bit of patience, and look where we are now. I even think when you take Bournemouth and Fulham into account, we're actually achieving a lot more than they are, because they were both Premier League clubs a lot more recently than Forest. When we all came up together in 2022, they had not long come down from the Premier League, both of them. So I think it just shows you how far we've come in such a short space of time, that we are where we are now. We're in the top 4.
Maybe a little bit of luck and a little bit of judgment. So obviously the serious levels of investment that have been made by the club, but then the fact that I say 3 promoted teams were pretty poor last season. So in other years, maybe that would have seen Forest yo-yo in the way that Bournemouth and Fulham had done previously. Just lastly on this topic, before we go into a quick break, that save by Emi Martinez, would you say it is one of the greatest saves of all time?
Oh, yeah, it's phenomenal. The fact that he's managed to save it when he's not even facing the ball and somehow stop it from crossing the line is, incredible. We've seen some good saves down the years at the City ground. That's probably the best from an opposition player that I've seen.
It really says something about Forest, doesn't it? That they could have that happen, concede a goal 3 minutes later, and then still come back, have that goal disallowed, the offside goal, which I'm still not sure about, and yet still come back and win the match.
It's a testament to how good the team is right now, that we are in games like that where you've got so much that's not quite going for you, but to still keep coming back, keep creating chances and not give up until the very end. They're brilliant qualities to have. Every football fan wants their team to have that. Doesn't always happen, But it feels like we've got that now, and that's going to be massive for us in picking points up over the season, because a Forest team in previous years would have easily folded in a situation like that and given up and kind of accepted their fate. But this team doesn't seem to do that, and I think that's credit to the players first of all, but Nuno and his coaching staff, because they've instilled some really good habits in this team, and it's good to see Forest digging in and finding results any which way that they can.
Yeah. And to paraphrase the gaffer, it wasn't just about ability, that was about desire.
This episode is brought to you by Iams Pet Food. When you choose Iams dry dog or cat food, you can see a difference in your pet with your own eyes. Healthy energy in 5 days, healthy digestion in 10 days, and healthy skin and coat in just 25 days. Satisfaction for you and them. Guaranteed or your money back. Feed Iams dry dog or cat food and see a visible difference. Visit iams.com/difference to learn more.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
Welcome back to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast, and our Friday Five with me, Rich Ferraro, and him, Steven Toplis. Now, Steven, the fourth story that Jamie brought us, we'll just spend just a minute on this. Just to mention, it's been a year since Steve Cooper lost his job at Forest, and therefore a year since Nuno's been in the hot seat. I think it's okay. Last year we likened it to a relationship breakup, didn't we? Because of the sheer level of emotion and upset, but also tinged with that knowledge that this kind of thing is inevitable sometimes. I don't know about you. For me, it still feels that way. I still feel like this residual guilt and love for Coops, but knowing that it's for the best. And what I would say has been a positive surprise, and I discussed this with Baz recently on last week's Friday Five, is that Nuno has proven to be, frankly, warmer and cuddlier than we could have expected. So, and then add to that, would Coops have been able to take us to the top half of the table? Probably not. So, yeah, it was painful, but necessary, would you say?
It was, yeah. And when you look at how Forest have come on in the last year, there's no arguing that it was the right decision. I felt really bad for Steve Cooper that it ended the way that it did. I don't think he deserved that. But it is football, and it can be a cruel game sometimes. And the way that Forest have progressed under Nuno, the way that he has come in and taken the job on, I don't think it was an easy job by any means, given where we were and the form that we were showing under Steve Cooper at the time. Yeah, it was a tough job, but he got us over the line last season, kept us up, and then this season we're absolutely flying. And he's showing as well, Nuno, what a good manager he is, because he came into Forest off the back of, not directly off the back of Spurs, but his last experience in English football was the job at Spurs that didn't work out. And yeah, he's doing a really impressive job. But to throw it back to Cooper, obviously he moved on to Leicester after leaving Forest, and that didn't work out for him. I never thought it was the right move, in all honesty, and that Leicester was never the right club for him. So hopefully he can go away, have a think about his next job, and make it a successful one, because we will always be indebted to Steve Cooper and what he did for the club. His achievements will never be forgotten. And we wouldn't be fourth in the table now, fourth in the Premier League, were it not for Steve Cooper getting us into the league in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And to hark back to something that we said just before the break, just like Nuno saying that the win against Villa was down to, it wasn't just football, it was also desire. And that's what got us promoted. It was harnessing the footballing ability, but getting every single person in the stadium, moving in the same direction. And I know we lost on the night, but that semi-final against Sheffield United was a classic case in point. And the fact that Yatesy in the post-match interview straight after said, when we were flagging, 110 minutes gone and we had nothing left in the legs and it's the fans that kept us going, we couldn't have done this without you. That was the Steve Cooper effect. So, yeah, we owe him a lot. Let's just move on to the last story, which is stadium plans. And This is all a bit unconfirmed, but has been reported by a YouTube account who's been on the stadium tour. And it seems as though we are getting there with the plans to redevelop the stadium. The idea is that we need this Section 106 order, and so that should hopefully be signed off with the local authority in the near future. The idea is that the Peter Taylor stand can retain some seating, but everything behind it will be demolished, and it might take place next season. So does that mean next season as in 2025 or 2026? Not quite sure. They're still waiting to confirm where the dressing rooms and the media suites and so on will be housed. And the intention is to remove the roof in the long term of the Bridgeford end and to basically bring the seats up to the same height as the Brian Clough so we can have a wraparound effect, a proper wraparound effect. And the final goal is by 2028 to have a capacity of 42,000 seats, and they'll worry about the rest after that. So unconfirmed, but if true, this is finally the progress that we were promised over 5 years ago, isn't it?
It all sounds very good, doesn't it? Very impressive and really exciting. And hopefully this is going to be the start of getting the ground redeveloped, and most notably the Peter Taylor stand. If they can find a way to make it where 3,000 seats can remain, which I'm assuming will be that front bank of seats, either they will remain in structure somehow or they'll be replicated in a temporary way, and then everything else behind is demolished. That will hopefully speed up the process and provide the least amount of disruption possible, because you're only then going to have to move maybe 2,000-3,000 season ticket holders rather than 6 or 6,000 fans rather. So, yeah, it's all very exciting. I like the idea as well of them extending the Bridgeford stand upward and moving that level with the Brian Clough stand and having the seats all the way round. Again, that will be really good to increase the capacity. You look at it, this stadium might need to be hosting European football sooner rather than later. So these upgrades would be most welcome and would bring the City Ground into the modern age, because we all know it's crying out for it.
Yeah, and I know I've said this before, but it brings things into perspective when you realise that the newest stand in the ground is over 30 years old now. Let's just very briefly talk about the Bridgeford stand, because I was a teenager when they built it, and you would have been a bit younger. But did you recall feeling a little bit disappointed when you saw it built, and it's like, it's only 1.5 tiers? What the hell's that about?
Yeah, I mean, my first game in the mid-90s was I was sat in the Trent end looking at it thinking, why on earth does that thing drop down that side? It makes no sense. Yeah, it was all to do with the light, wasn't it, or something for the houses behind in the end, whereas, of course, when it was open terrace, you never needed to worry about that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, if there's a way that we've made that work now and that will be included in the plans, I think that's a great positive, because, well, it's a nice little quirk. It's not practical. We can get more people in, and that's important, and makes for a better atmosphere, and just getting more Forest fans through the gates is what we need as the club to keep growing and keep achieving great things.
Absolutely. So let's just, to finish off today's podcast, let's have a little think about this weekend's match coming up. Now, Brentford is going to be a tough one, isn't it, Stephen? And purely and simply because their home record is they're basically like Forest a couple of years ago. Home record, absolutely exceptional. And how on earth are they doing it? Scoring loads and loads of goals. And bearing in mind that Forest have got generally a good defensive record, but when we've conceded quite a few at a time. So does that give you any nerves going into this weekend's match?
I wouldn't say I'm too nervous going into it, because I think the way we're playing, we can get results against anybody, and we are set up to do very well away from home. Look at some of the results we've picked up already. But yeah, Brentford's home form is completely at odds with their away form. They're very strong at home. They score plenty of goals, and we've got to be prepared to defend well in this game, keep them at bay, and then hopefully use our counter-attacking qualities to hurt them, because they can concede goals. And I'm reasonably confident we can go there and get a result. I don't think we've picked up any points at the G-Tech Community Stadium yet since they moved in. I think we've lost on both occasions we've played there, so we're due a win. It'd be nice to get a win as well after what happened last season with Ivan Toney and the foam. It'd be nice to get one over on them that way. And yeah, I'm reasonably confident we can get something down there.
It's our Tom's least favourite ground by quite a long way, but he is going to be going, and he will hopefully be reporting back on the match with our George at the weekend. Just so you know, Nuno had his pre-match press conference, and he said that obviously Danilo and Sangare are not ready to play just yet, and the Forest boss insisted that the club needs them as soon as possible, but it's going to be a while. There are other issues with fitness in the squad, and of course we did see Yatesy and Murillo both go off in last week's match. And he sort of also says about Brentford, they're a very good team, they're very strong at home and doing very well. Defensively, we have to be really good, solid and compact. And like you said, Stephen, Brentford are good at scoring, but their defence is probably their weak link. So do you think that maybe Nuno will... he might not change the formation, but he might just tweak the tactics so that we can have that compact defence, but also maybe with the two wingers and that kind of ability to flood forward, he'll be relying on that to try and get behind Brentford's back line?
I think so. I think you go with the same approach that worked so well at Liverpool. Keep it compact, frustrate them, and then catch them when they've come forward. And I think the likes of Hudson-Odoi and Alanga, this can be a game where they can really enjoy themselves, get plenty of opportunities to run forward, get supported by the likes of Chris Wood, obviously, Elliot Anderson, who's really impressing me, Morgan Gibbs-White. If we can get those players in those positions running at Brentford and causing them trouble on the counter-attack, there's goals in it for us. It's just making sure that we keep them quiet at the other end, because the likes of Brian Mbeumo, Johan Wissa, some really good attackers in their team. So that's where we've got to be on our game.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I say, we'll have a report on that after the weekend. Just a couple of other very quick lines that I want to bring you with regard to things going on at the City Ground. So the first thing is the women's team are through to the semi-finals of the Women's FA Cup, and they will be playing against #United. Yeah, I said it. Then the other thing is that the B team had a 2-3 defeat at home to Manchester City in the last week. And then beyond that, the other thing that's worth talking about is the multi-bank collection that Forest had last weekend in the Villa match, and as well as the club saying they've been blown away by the generosity of fans for the food and multi-bank collection. It's also worth pointing out that Marinakis had pledged to double the total weight of all donations, and they've reached nearly 3,000 kilograms of donations at the time of recording. And then, as if that weren't enough, let's just also point out that the club are putting themselves at the heart of the community again. So they've announced that they will be hosting a festive open house on Monday the 23rd. So the club are opening their doors to fans and local residents who are experiencing either loneliness, homelessness, or isolation. So from 10 till 1, the club's European suite will be open with the heating on, coffee, mince pies, music, and you can go in and have a conversation or not. And the event is open to anyone who may benefit and no requirement to book. So a wonderful, wonderful gesture by the club. And that's where we leave it. So as I say, we'll have our match report. Next week, we'll have our Christmas episode of Football Terrorists, including an interview with friend of the podcast, the City Ground Stadium announcer, Mark Dennison, who will be sharing his thoughts on Nuno and Steve Cooper, amongst other things. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you to Steve Stephen, thank you to Jamie, and most of all, thank you, listener. You know where to find our details. You can find social media links and all of our podcast hosting opportunities available at 1865.football. We'll catch you soon. Come on, you Reds.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.